I certainly didn't need another way to strip wires, having seen this model here being used on BigClive.com so often over the years. And I finally picked one up cheap on eBay by Tolson. I think it was like $8 shipped. I'll put a link down below if I can find these. I haven't been able to find them on Amazon recently. You got plenty of other ways to strip wires here. A lot of times with the bigger cables, I just go for a box cutter, an X-Acto blade, something nice and sharp, and that works really well. But other times you want to use something a little quicker, a little more repeatable, and a little more consistent. And all of these kind of offer that in various degrees. Big thank you to our good friends at Electra Sound Systems for making the video possible. If you are in need of a rental Avid S6L, any sort of Shure Axient PSM 1000 or D&B Audio-Technica here on the East Coast, they are the folks to call. They've got all that stuff. They're based out of Wilmington, Delaware. They specialize in turnkey packages and last-minute rentals. And if you are in a jam, give them a shout and they'll get you sorted out. ElectraSoundSystems.com. Obviously, you can use a set of side cutters with a really sharp blade, and that helps too. Some folks are really, really good at getting in there and just kind of nibbling it just right. I don't really like this method. I'm not that consistent with it. You do it when you have to, but it tends to always leave little strands kind of getting chunked up, and I just don't love doing that. That's definitely one method. You can use really sharp, small side cutters or the bigger, different types of cutters that you see typically, lineman pliers and things like that. Even something like this, which is a crimper and has a nice sharp end that you could, if you were in a pinch, certainly strip a wire. Oh, these get dull and then you just end up mashing everything trying to get through to that. Again, that was pretty clean, didn't destroy too much, but those are kind of the common bigger wire options, along with something like this, an auto stripper, and a lot of folks like these. Get a lot of comments about these. The appropriate number on the gauge over here, and perfect every time. And this is really great for larger stuff like this. I absolutely love this auto stripper for larger stuff. It's just so easy, repeatable, and consistent. The reason I don't use this so much though is it's very heavy and really hard if you're doing something smaller and you need to get, the 20 gauge is like all the way over in the corner. So if you need to get into that with anything other than a spool of cable, and that's just sheared that solid core wire straight off of there. So maybe I had the wrong 18 didn't do it at all. So for smaller cables, this doesn't really work great for me. Maybe some other folks have better results, but it's tough. These ones here I like well enough, but they go dull very quickly. I definitely like these ones the most just because they're the largest. When I always try to pull the cable away from the stripper as opposed to wrenching the stripper away from the cable. But again, these, in my experience, have gone dull, and I don't always get it just into the right hole, and sometimes you go one too short and you cut the cable, or you go one too big and you make a real big mess. You kind of hack it halfway. You can maybe see how the blade on these isn't great quality. It tends to get chunked up pretty easily cutting through solid core stuff. So definitely, very useful, just with some limitations. I don't like this channel lock with the lock on it. I just tend to hit it too often and lock it closed. Not a huge fan of that. So these, for tiny wires, the nice part about these, the thing that sets them apart, I guess, is that it's got a depth gauge that you can set. So once you set that to fit the kind of cable or wire you were using, it is a very repeatable process. For small hookup wire, this just makes it really simple because you can go in head first as opposed to side on, which is every other option here is either a side on or you've got to get a blade. The easiest way usually to deal with these for me is an X-Acto blade. This is all well and good, but when it's actually connected to a board and you're doing something, now obviously you don't want to be stripping wires that are connected to things if you can avoid it, but sometimes in actual practice it just happens, and to be able to get this into somewhere really small and get a very consistent strip on that without doing any damage. It's like, I'm gonna trim this down even further, right? And if you just had to reuse these wires for whatever reason, you'd be able to get in there still and have a pretty good time at it. So that's kind of cool. So yeah, it tends to work really well. I have not yet pulled off a strand once I've set it right. I have not had it eat into another strand, which is pretty rare. Like usually at this point, if you're trying to strip that much, if you've already got something stripped and you're trying to get this much off, most other methods I know of will end up damaging these strands somehow. It takes a heck of a lot more care anyway than I'm putting into this to not damage those strands with most other methods that I know of. Like here's a good example. Now this is stuck. Let's see if we can, yep, right off, didn't damage any strands. Looking at it, I can see some dents where I cut it into it at different points, but there's definitely no damage done to the underlying wire inside of this very thin hookup cable. That's kind of what I'm interested in this for. Tolson, they're like $8. It leaked a whole bunch of oil all over everything. It's still doing that. It's got some oil for keeping it from corroding and shipping, and maybe I should be doing that more to the rest of my tools because they're all going a little rusty. Tolson, pretty cool, very cheap, and super repeatable wire stripping for really small electronics hookup wire. Again, I'm just going, hopefully you can see this. I'm trying to be as heavy-handed as possible with this tiny hookup wire, coming in well into the wire and pulling. See, now there I've ripped it, but that was me not being careful. We'll do this other side real quick. Let's see if we can do it right here, right? This one here is a little thinner, so we just need to back off just a quarter turn maybe. Yep, there it is. Doesn't get a whole lot easier than that. Pretty cool little tool for $8. If you're interested in other ways to strip wire besides the usual suspects, Tolson, and I'll link them down below if I can find them from anybody else. Again, just a first look. We'll see how this holds up and I'll report back. Thanks so much to everybody who participated in sending in contributions for the Founders Wall. You have helped to make this workshop possible and to set up things going forward for the new year. I'm really excited to hopefully see as many of you as possible at the NAMM show coming up in January if you're going to be out there in California for the show. And I'll be posting time for a meetup at the show itself during the week. Someday we'll get together and hang out somewhere on the show site. So stay tuned on social media for that. Hope everybody has a great, safe, and happy new year, and I'll see you in 2020.